Hello, this is Mead with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. We're going to go ahead and start the webinar. I'm the presenter and the one running the webinar. I'm Kit Mead, the Technical Assistance Coordinator with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN. My contact information is kmead@autisticadvocacy.org or 202-595-3655. We'll be covering how the federal government works and ways to take part in some parts of it. There will be several preset question and answer periods, as well as an interactive period. And we'll also be covering other ways advocates can work for disability rights at the federal level. So, how the federal government works. First, we're going to talk about the branches of the federal government. The executive branch of the federal government consists of the president, the vice president, the president's cabinet, and a lot of federal agencies. They carry out laws by signing them into law and creating rules. The president is head of state, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and leader of the federal government. The same person can only serve 2 terms as president. The vice president supports the president. In the case of a president being unable to serve, they become president. And cabinet members serve as advisors to the president. They include the vice president and members of executive departments. Federal agencies are special government organizations set up for a specific purpose. They usually create rules and recommendations for what they focus on. These could be such as creating rules and recommendations about the environment, like the Environmental Protection Agency, or they could be disability and aging related, such as the Administration on Community Living, or ACL, which is explained later in this. These agencies can have several smaller organizations working within them. The legislative branch consists of Congress and 2 other agencies, other agencies that provide support to Congress. Congress, in turn, consists of 2 separate groups, the House and the Senate. They create laws. The judicial branch of the federal government consists of the Supreme Court and other federal courts. They interpret the country's laws. And we have a nice little graphic here. So the executive branch can veto laws Congress makes and enforces laws if approved through federal agencies. The legislative branch creates and passes laws and can sometimes override the president's veto. And then there's the judicial branch, where a law might get challenged in court and the court decides for or against the law. But how do lawmakers pass laws? Most legislation begins as a bill. A bill is simply a detailed idea for a law placed on paper. And first, someone has to have an idea for a law. It can be an advocacy group and individual advocates who come up with the idea for a law. Sometimes lawmakers come up with their own ideas for laws. Either way, advocates can influence the process of writing legislation. The process of writing a law so that it will be accepted by enough to be passed by members of both political parties is hard and can take a long time. It will also need to overcome citizens and other groups that don't agree with the bill. These people and groups may have contact with their representatives and work against it. In step 2, they're slightly different for the House and the Senate. In the House, it's placed in a basket by the clerk's desk when the bill is written and ready to be read in front of the House. In the Senate, it is given to a specially appointed person to decide where it goes. In both, that bill gets sent to a committee that deals with its issues. In step 3, the committee usually holds public hearings on the bill. People tell them their viewpoints on the bill. These are open to the public. Then they go through the bill and change parts of the bill, which is called a markup session. These sessions are not open to the public. Then they finally take action on the bill. They may report the measures taken on it and send it to the proper House or Senate for a vote, with or without changes made. If they make a lot of changes, they may send in a whole new bill, or they may not do anything with the bill. This means the bill will not have a chance to be voted on, and this is known as tabling the bill. Step 4. The process of voting on a bill is not always simple. First, they must discuss and debate a bill. Then, they can suggest changes to the bill and vote on those first. Or, they might even send it back to the committee. Step 5. If passed in the House, the bill goes to the Senate next, and vice versa. The other part of Congress proposes their own changes to the bill. The other part of Congress then discusses the other's changes, but often the House and the Senate must create a committee together to resolve differences. Step 6. If they agree upon the bill, they send it to the President. The President can sign it into law, veto it, let it become law without a signature, or wait until the end of the section to pocket veto it. Pocket vetoing occurs when the President does not sign the bill and the session of Congress runs out. Congress may override the President's veto with a 2/3 majority vote. Next, we're going to talk about the federal budget process. A budget is a way of managing money and how it gets spent. All policy initiatives and programs have to be paid for, and the budget says how that will happen. But why does it matter? If you care about an issue, you need to pay attention to how much money the budget gives to your issue. Passing a law isn't helpful unless the law program is paid for. Federal programs involving disability are also funded by the federal budget. Advocates can spend a lot of time advocating for their issues to get more money and attention in the budget. And here's how you create the federal budget, or how the government creates the federal budget. The President submits a detailed budget request. It tells Congress what the President recommends for the federal spending. It also details his priorities for federal programs. It also shows his recommendations for spending and tax policy changes. Step 2. Congress works together with the House and Senate budget committees. Their function is to draft and enforce the budget resolution, or plan. Once the committees pass these resolutions or plans, the bills go to the House and the Senate floors. The House and the Senate can amend them or change them by a majority vote. Then they hold a House and Senate conference that fixes differences. Some years they do not pass a budget resolution. Then the House and the Senate pass 2 separate items that still manage to give out funds appropriately. The last year's budget resolution is used. Step 3. After passing the budget resolution, Congress considers certain bills needed to fund certain programs. There's a reconciliation process that they can use to make the process go faster because they need to do it by a certain time. If they do not pass appropriation bills or bills that give out funding, it should pass and the President should sign. If the President does not sign or Congress does not pass it, parts of the federal government may shut down. Okay, I'm going to take a moment for questions. Hold on, I'm trying to unmute everybody. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Kit, this is Trina.
Hi, Trina. What questions do you have?
You said that the Senate and the House composed two different houses, but you said something, you were going really quick about how they were, there was another agency involved?
Okay, hold on, I'm gonna... Okay, ask that again, Trina.
When you were first started talking about the legislative branch, you said that there were 2 branches of government and then another agency. What is that other agency?
Oh, I meant to say that in the legislative, there's the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branch. And 2 parts of the legislative branch are the House and the Senate. And so,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I thought you said there was another agency involved there, and I wasn't sure about that.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go on to the next stuff. This is the federal rulemaking process, is what we're talking about next. What is the federal rulemaking process? It's also known as the regulatory process, and agencies create rules and regulations about laws, mostly laws that the legislative branch has passed. There are many chances for advocates to influence these rules. The first step is that Congress passes an act or a law that needs rules. The agency creating the rules holds public hearings in which anyone can testify. They meet with stakeholders. And a stakeholder is a person or group with an interest in something. And what you can do in step 1 to influence this is that advocates can send written testimony to the public hearings or work to have someone present at the public hearing. Advocates can also meet with agency representatives. To find out the time and location for the public hearing, advocates can search on the specific agency's webpage for information. This can be complicated to navigate as there will be many public hearings for different things. Step 2. The agency creates the proposed rule. They receive further input from stakeholders. It's not an official rule yet. What advocates can do in step 2 is that since the agency is receiving further feedback from stakeholders, advocates can request meetings, write letters, or call in. In step 3 of the rulemaking process, the Office of Management and Budget may review the proposed rule. Their main job is to produce the President's budget, but they also review the quality of agency programs, policies, and procedures. In step 3, advocates can request a meeting with the Office of Management and Budget to try and influence the rules. Step 4 of the rulemaking process is that the agency publishes the rule in the Federal Register. The Federal Register is the daily publication for rules, proposed rules, and notices of the federal government. The agency opens a public comment period where people and other stakeholders may submit comments. What advocates can do in step 4 is read the proposed rule. So at www.federalregister.gov, you can find out where to submit your comments by searching for public comments on federalregister.gov. And then you can narrow the search by the type of document and the name of the agency and other specifics. You should also read the entire notice to find out where you should submit your comments. There's usually an area that will give you the name of the person you should submit your comments to. In step 5 of the federal rulemaking process, the agency looks at the public comments. They can take them into account and revise the proposed rule into a final rule. And what advocates can do in step 5 is mostly just read the draft of the final rule. In the step 6 of the rulemaking process, the Office of Management and Budget reviews the final rule. At this point, stakeholders may request meetings with OMB. And what advocates can do in step 6 is request meetings with OMB. Step 7 of the federal rulemaking process is the agency publishes the rule in the Federal Register for the final time. The rule goes into effect. Congress may pass a resolution of disapproval if they do not like the rule, but the resolution will not have any effect unless it is signed by the President. Anyone can challenge the new rule in court, and the court can rule for or against it. What advocates can do in step 7 is if they don't like the rule, they can put together a legal challenge, or they can work on putting the rule into place on a state level. Okay, I'm going to open up questions again, and I hope I'm not going too fast. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of background noise, and I'm sorry. Not sure what to do about that. Someone had a question about how many amendments does it take before the bill got passed? And a lot of times it takes, they can do as many changes to the bill as they want before voting on it. So there's not a set limit on that. And does anyone else have other questions?
How can you track bills throughout this complicated process?
You can, on the federal websites, where you have like www.house.gov and www.senate.gov, and you can usually find the bills that they're discussing and debating and arguing about on there, and it'll tell you what stage the bill is in. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Is that information going to be posted on one of the slides?
I can
place of possibility. Someone with a
put it in the resource guide for when it comes out.
Okay.
do it.
Okay. I'm going to move on from the Q&A period. So next I'm going to talk about some federal agencies related to disability. The first one is the National Council on Disability. The National Council on Disability advises the President, Congress, and other federal agencies about policies, programs, practices, and procedures that affect people with disabilities. It is an independent federal agency, and they advise these groups by gathering people to discuss certain items, gathering data, discussing current controversies and debates, finding and creating solutions to both emerging and long-time challenges, and providing tools to make sure putting policies in place works smoothly. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Department of Health and Human Services. HHS's goal is to protect the health of all Americans and give essential human services. And it oversees several other federal groups that involve disability, such as the Administration for Community Living. And HHS is vital to disability advocacy for a number of reasons, and because disability tends to fall under categories of health. It also operates a few programs relevant to disability. Next is the Department of Education. And while education is primarily a state-level issue, the Federal Department of Education still serves several roles. This includes providing funding on the state level, research and data collection, and directing the national conversation on how to best serve students. Next is the Administration on Community Living, or for Community Living, sorry. The Administration for Community Living has many units. It was formed under President Obama and brought several groups together. The Administration on Aging, the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, and the HHS Office on Disability. And their goal is to increase access to community supports for older adults and people with disabilities. And they do a lot of policy research on best practice and ways to make communities possible for people. Okay, so we're going to play this interactive part that I had written out. And Trina, you're not allowed to play this game because you were at the last webinar. Okay. So this is going to basically ask you about certain issues, and I'm going to ask you if they are part of the legislative branch or the executive branch. And I'm going to unmute you. Hold on. Okay. The first one is the law that created Medicaid in 1965, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Settings Rule on Home and Community-Based Services that clarified rules about where providers could give HCBS. Does anyone, I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to think. Does anyone have any answers?
Well, the law that created Medicaid would be legislative.
Yep, that's right.
And the CMS rule would be executive.
Yay! The Americans with Disabilities Act rules issued in 1992, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one, unless anyone has an answer.
Well, let's see, the rules are executive, the ADA itself legislative.
I mean, this one is great. It's just like in here. And anyhow, so.
Okay. The Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, or AIDD, created in the Developmental Disabilities Act.
Okay, AIDD created Executive, Developmental Disabilities Act legislative.
And then the next one is the Air Carrier Access Act and Specific Autism Guidance.
Yep. ACAA legislative, specific autism guidance is pretty vague, but we'll go with executive.
The Autism CARES or CARES Act, and creating the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee or IAC.
Creating the committee, executive, the act, anything with an act in it is legislative. An act is a law.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're getting at here. Yay! All the actual laws and acts are legislative, and all the specific rules and guidance are executive. The gap between a law or act being passed and the executive branch issuing rules on issues. For instance, the ADA passed in 1990. It did not have federally issued rules until 1992. And executive orders. An executive order is a directive issued to federal agencies, department leaders, or other people by the president. It does not need congressional approval. However, the judicial branch may strike it down in court as unconstitutional, which means it violates the U.S. Constitution. Congress may also pass a new law to try and render it invalid. Since the president has the power to veto laws, this can be ineffective unless Congress overrides the veto. Okay, and now there's another interactive part, which is going to be about state versus federal, because some powers are left to the state and some powers are with the federal government, and it's important to be able to tell which one is which. Okay, so I want people to tell me if this group of examples is a state issue or a federal issue. So Medicaid waivers for home and community-based services, Medicaid expansion to those 133% below the federal poverty line, and transportation issues, for the most part.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Okay, this set of examples. What?
Yeah, well, with the waivers, the states apply for them and the federal government grants them.
So yeah.
The Medicaid expansion has infamously been left up to the states, where most states governed by a certain party have rejected it. And transportation issues are generally left to states and sometimes local governments.
That is correct. State or federal, the Social Security, Income, and Achieving a Better Life Experience Act.
Both are basically federal, except some states have what's called a Supplemental Security Payment, SSP, and states have to pass legislation to implement the ABLE Act.
Both of these are generally federal issues. The implementing part is generally left to the states. State or federal, the Olmstead versus LC enforcement, which was the ruling on least restrictive settings and undue institutionalization. Autism insurance laws, putting into place Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. Okay, these are all state.
All state, yep.
Okay, and now state or federal, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services issue settings rule for HCBS and the Affordable Care Act itself, not the implementation.
Eds?
Okay. Yay, and these are the answers, which we already went over. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next section. So this is other ways advocates can influence federal policy. So coalitions. Even if you're not in DC, you can still join or influence coalitions at the national level. Start locally, connect with local organizations by attending their events and showing support. Find out their umbrella organization and form contacts at the national level. Find out how you can influence or join national coalitions. And it's important that you be able to provide input on specific matters affecting your area. And the state level advocacy guide, which is coming out soon, has a lot of detail on its state level coalitions if you want to look at that later. Telephone town hall meetings and district office meetings. Your senator or representative may hold telephone hall meetings. Instead of meeting with people in their state in person, they have a system in place where people receive phone calls from the lawmaker. Not everyone who signs up gets called, though. You can also visit your senator or representative's district office during open office hours or by scheduling a meeting. Some useful tips are to prepare. What questions do you want to ask? What do you want to bring to the attention of your legislator? What do you want them to know about the particular topic you are speaking on? Use a personal narrative. Tell them how their policies are affecting you and others like you. If you feel it would be beneficial, tell them how many people are in your organization that back your opinion. Have other people who share similar views on disability sign up to receive a phone call to increase the chance they will reach one of you. The next section is writing letters to lawmakers. You or a group can write letters to legislators about bills or other issues. The letter will depend on the issue. It's always best to keep it as short and simple as possible. And if it's possible, include a short personal story about how something has affected you or loved ones. You can also submit feedback as a stakeholder during the rulemaking process. Submitting public comments. Letters can usually be sent either through regular mail or through the place where you found the proposed rule or state plan. This is usually on the state website, but sometimes advocates create websites just to help people with the process. Letters to submit should probably be 2 to 3 pages and no more than 5. The format to follow includes your address, the date you sent the letter, and the address of the agency you are sending letters to. You can address the person as dear whomever it may concern unless you know the person you are sending it to. Introduce yourself and your connection to the topic. Then, discuss the main part of what you want to say to influence the regulation or state plan. Creating headings can help. Include references to other resources if available. Include a thank you at the end and an explanation of how to best contact you, and type your name at the bottom. Public hearings. Public hearings will be listed on an agency's website or on the Federal Register, depending on which stage of the regulations process they are in. It may be difficult to navigate, but usually you can search your state's website for the rule you want to testify about, or the agency's website. I apologize. Once you have found where the public hearing time and location, you'll want to locate where you can request to testify. If you are not in Washington, D.C., you may submit written testimony for the record. If approved to testify, write out your testimony. Your testimony should include concerns and what you think is good about the rule, a personal story, and data. It should also state your position and how the agency can create the best rule possible. And print out copies of your testimony. Again, this part was if you're in person. And this is also if you're in person. Once testifying, introduce yourself and your expertise on the rule. Give your testimony. Watch your time. You may be limited to about 3 minutes. Expect questions. Answer what you know. Do not pretend you know an answer if you are unsure. And offer to follow up on the ones you do not know. To follow up with the answers to the questions you did not know. And thank them for allowing you to testify. And then you can have meetings or calls with agency representatives, as discussed in the rulemaking process earlier. They can work a lot like meeting with lawmakers to advance or oppose an issue. Beforehand, you'll want to make sure you have read up and researched the issues you want to talk about so that you can get your points across accurately. And be prepared to follow up after the meeting and remind them of what you said. Or you can call them. Some other tips are write out what you want to say beforehand, highlighting the main issues. Practice before you go or call with other members of your group. Pick 1 or 2 main issues you want to talk about with the proposed rule. You may not have a lot of time to talk, and you want to make sure they remember. If you are calling instead of meeting in person, it's important to email them a fact sheet and a letter. Definitely write out what you want to say still, and practice what will happen in the conversation, and follow up afterwards. And this is the end. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, if no one has any questions, I would like to thank all of you for attending the webinar. And it should be available. In about 2 to 3 weeks, captioned on our YouTube channel, as well as and we'll also have a written resource guide accompanying it that is being formatted. Thank you for your time.